Welcome to the Medium in the Middle podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie, the medium in the middle. This podcast is going to walk you through my journey into mediumship and how I came to realize that I could communicate with souls that have passed over. My adventure started just over a year ago when unusual situations started happening to me. It wasn't until I really started to pay attention to them that it all started to come together. I wrote down everything that I was experiencing this past year in a little black book, and this podcast is going to be a recap of all of those memories leading up to where I am today in my mediumship journey. I will be releasing new episodes every Tuesday, and I recommend listening to the podcast in order, starting with episode 1, as my story will unfold more week by week. If you would like to stay connected with me, follow me on Instagram at mediuminthemiddle. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 14. Thank you so much for listening, and in today's episode, if I sound a little off, I do apologize. I lost my voice for a few days this week, and it just came back, and it's Tuesday, and I need to record and get this episode out, so I'm happy that it came back today. I lost my voice due to an energetical block. I wasn't sick. I'm avoiding conversations that I need to be having, and my body very quickly shows up physically for me when I'm not doing something that I need to be doing. So I lost my voice for 3 days until I realized how important these conversations were that I need to be having. So pay attention to when your body's speaking to you and don't let it get that far, as my lesson today. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast. It will let you know every time I release a new episode on Tuesdays. And if you are using iTunes, I would really appreciate a rating and a review. If you just scroll to the bottom, it's super easy to do it. It will really help me out in the podcast world. So without further ado, let's jump right into episode 14. So in last week's episode, I talked about how I had just moved and things kind of stopped. And for a while, I wondered if I had lost this gift that I had just recently realized I had. I was like, okay, I started to think I was a medium and then got all this evidence towards I might be a medium, started to accept this mediumship abilities. And then I move and I have a change of scenery and my life changes and my job changes and my relationship status changes and everything kind of stops. It was radio silence. And I started to think, okay, did I lose it? Did something happen? Did I do something? And it was a very big time for me. It was a time of change, a transition. I newly moved to Banff, so a lot of things were happening, a lot of new, which was all really good at the time. As I mentioned in the last episode, when I did my Reiki Master's course for the first time, I will talk about the second time in an episode, of course. I was given a little bit of guidance in the course being like, why would the spirits be bothering you at this time when so many other things are happening in your life this is just another layer that just can't be dealt with right now, but don't worry, you didn't lose it. It will come back when it's time. So I really took that information to heart and I was like, okay, they're giving me time to heal and to adjust and to get used to this new life. But I do trust that I didn't lose this ability and that it will come back when it's time. And I know right now is not the right time. So this episode, I'm going to be talking about what was happening in between, because although I wasn't getting full experiences like I've been having in the past 13 episodes, a lot of things were still happening in my Reiki appointments. So I was working as a Reiki practitioner before I moved to Banff, and then I continued to do Reiki when I moved to Banff out of a spa in town, because Reiki is my home base. Reiki is my heart, my passion. I love it so much, and it was like my normal. So I knew that I had to continue treating clients even in my new town and at least offer it. So in today's episode, I'm going to be talking about 2 specific experiences that I had with Reiki clients. So because I was working out of a generic spa, anyone could just book an appointment with me. I do explain at the beginning of my appointments that I am also a medium and that messages might come through. So if people are open to that or not, just because if the client is coming in for Reiki, I don't all of a sudden want to start telling them about their grandma that they weren't expecting to hear from. So the first story that I'm going to start with happened with a woman who happened to be pregnant. So this woman was 5 months pregnant, so she was physically showing. She did have a little bit of a bump. So when she walked into the room, I introduced myself and I said, "Oh, you're pregnant. That's really nice. How far along are you?" She told me that she was 5 months pregnant. "Oh, wow, that's so nice. Are you excited to be having a baby girl?" And she said, "Oh, actually, we don't know the sex yet." And I said, "Oh, sorry." Said, "It's kind of a Reiki thing. I do this often and I really should learn how to shut my mouth." And she said, "We're actually not far enough along to know the sex yet, but soon we will be." And I said, "Oh, okay, well, I really think it's a girl." And she said, "Yeah, I had Reiki a few months ago and that practitioner also told me it was a girl." She's like, "But we're actually not going to find out the sex. We're going to wait until the baby's born." And I said, "Okay, I'm so sorry for blurting that out. But also, if both of us told you it was a girl, that's kind of interesting." She's like, "I think it's a girl," but she said, "Whenever I think of holding a baby in my arms," she said, "I picture a boy in my arms." So she's like, "I'm not sure." And I said, "Yeah, okay." I'm like, "I definitely could be wrong, but I'm sorry that I said that right off the bat," and kind of lay down on the table. So she laid down on the table. I made sure she was comfortable. I haven't done a lot of pregnant women, so they just need a little bit more support under their legs and pillows and things like that. So we got her all situated. I gave her the speech about how I am a medium and that if messages might come through, if she would like them or not. And she said that she was open to any messages. She definitely just wanted to relax and enjoy this experience. This was kind of a spa day that was just for her. So because she said that she wanted it to be a relaxing experience, in my mind I was kind of like, okay, I'm not going to say as much as I would normally say. Maybe I'll just keep quiet. Hopefully nothing will come through. So when I first started to work on her, I started to really feel the baby's heartbeat so strongly. And it was strong and healthy, and it was this kind of heartbeat. And I said, okay, maybe that's just because, there's a soul in her stomach, so I can feel both their heartbeats. I didn't think anything of it. And then the baby kind of started to let me know that she started to say, "My heart is fine. My heart is fine. There was never anything wrong with my heart. My heart is fine. I'm healthy. I'm healthy. Like everything's okay." Kind of like tell my mom everything's okay. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know this woman. She's 5 months pregnant. I think this is her first child. And I don't want to ask her if there was any complications because then I don't want her to think that I'm picking up on complications. But if there was complications, the baby is trying to say, she's okay. So I was thinking in my head, how do I approach this and ask her if the baby had any problems with her heartbeat without scaring this woman if there wasn't any problems? So I kind of thought that I would just approach it in this way. I said, "Your baby is showing me a really strong heartbeat, and she wants you to know she's okay. So I'm not sure if there was anything wrong with her heartbeat, if you couldn't hear her heartbeat, but she's really showing me a strong heartbeat. She wants you to know she has a strong heartbeat. She's healthy. She's fine. She's always been fine." And I said to her, "She keeps showing me this over and over again, and I feel like it's an important thing that you know." And the mom was kind of like, "Okay, And she didn't say anything. So I was like, oh, maybe this doesn't make sense for her. Maybe I'm off. I start thinking in my head, just shut up, Steph. Like, do Reiki. This woman isn't here for all the other stuff you do. And then after a few minutes go by, the client starts to talk and she says, "It's really interesting that she's telling me about her heartbeat because for the first 16 weeks, we couldn't hear her heartbeat. We only got to hear her heartbeat just 2 weeks ago." And I said, "Oh, okay. That's interesting." And she said, "Yeah, but it ended up being that the reason we couldn't find her heartbeat was because of the doctor, and it wasn't because of the baby's heartbeat." She said, "We have obviously since switched doctors, but we found out that it was the doctor's fault that we couldn't hear the heartbeat, not because the baby, there was anything wrong." So she's like, "That's really interesting that she's telling me her heartbeat is fine and always was fine." She's like, "We know that now, but we didn't know that for the first 16 weeks before we could hear her heartbeat." And I said, "Oh, okay, well, she just wants you to know that she's really like healthy and happy and everything's going good for her." And in my sessions, once I start to talk, it's kind of like the floodgates are opened. So once that piece of information kind of resonated with her, I ran with it and took this opportunity to tell her everything else that I was picking up on. So I start to say, "And is this your first child?" And she says yes. And I said, "Okay, your baby is showing me like you crying and having these breakdowns. And you're saying like, I can't do it. How will I ever be a mom? I'm so afraid. I'm so scared." And she's showing me like you bawling like quite regularly because you're so afraid to be a mom. And the client on the table starts crying and she says, "Yeah, I do cry very often. I'm so nervous about being a mom. I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I have what it takes." And I said to her, "Your baby wants you to know that you're going to be a great mom, and she's so excited to meet you, and she already knows you're going to be wonderful. And also, the universe is kind of going to be on your side with this one. You're going to have a good, easy baby." I said, "Again, this could be wrong, but if I think that you're going to have it easy on the first go, she's going to sleep regularly. You're going to have an okay labor where it's not going to be the most painful thing in the world or a bad experience. Things are just going to work out the first time, and the universe is doing this to you for a reason because it's meant to calm your nerves with the first one." I said, "Don't quote me on any other children that you have, but your first one is going to be quote unquote an easy baby." So then I started to ask her some more questions, and I said, "Do you sing to your baby often?" And she said, "No." And I say, "Okay." I'm like, "I really see this clear vision of someone singing to someone at an occasion. Did you recently sing to someone at an occasion? I feel like it's a grandma." And she's like, "No, my grandma's alive." I was like, "Okay." So I kind of start up and I keep working. And then I keep seeing this clear vision of people singing like a tribute to someone, and it's a grandma. So I asked her again, I'm like, "Are you sure haven't, and maybe like in the past 2 years, 1 year, someone at an event sang to someone? It's someone's grandma." She's like, "No." I'm like, "Okay." And for the rest of the appointment, this kept coming up for me. I asked the client 3 times the same question, and she said, no, each time. So in my head, I'm kind of like, "Steph, stop asking." She said no. And then I said, "This woman is telling me that her name is like a flower, like Rose or Lily. Whatever her name is, it's like the same name as a flower." She said, "No, I don't have a grandma with a name of a flower." I said, "Okay." I kept working, doing my Reiki. Came up again, woman with the name of a flower. Ask her again. So I ask her again, "Are you sure? Nothing? Rose, Lily, name of a flower?" She said no. I said, "Okay, I feel like someone was singing to me at like an event and my name starts with the name of a flower." And I said, "Do you have a sister?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Is she alive?" And she said, "Yes." I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, "Who has a sister that passed away that would be connected to this grandma?" She said, "I'm not sure." So after I asked this 3 or 4 times, because it was very pressing to me, I just kind of gave up on the subject. I'm like, this woman clearly isn't connecting with anything I'm saying. She told me she wants to have a relaxing experience. I'm going to stop pressing the subject. So I finished up the Reiki appointment and I tried to stay very quiet. And at the end, she was thanking me and hugging me. And then she kind of looks at me with this deer in headlights look. And she said, "Oh my God, I know who the flower woman is." And I said, "Oh, who?" She said, "My best friend." I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." She said, "My best friend is like my sister. So this does happen often where her energy will come up." She said, "But her grandma's name is Iris, and she just got married last year, and at her wedding, they sang a song in tribute to the grandma because her grandma had passed away by then. So at the wedding, they sang this song to the grandma whose name was Iris." And then she said, "And my best friend's sister has passed away. So that must be her sister because it would also be her grandmother who has also passed away." And I said, "Oh, wow, like I've never had so much information come through for, your best friend. I'm sorry that it was nothing for you." And she said, No, this is a lovely message because me and my best friend are like sisters and I can't wait to tell her this information." She said, this has actually happened before. She said, I went to a psychic before, and the psychic started going on about some Winnie the Pooh tattoo. And I was just thinking, wow, this lady is so off. No, I don't have a Winnie the Pooh tattoo. No, it has nothing, like no friendship, best friends, sister tattoos. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have any tattoos in memory of someone. She said later that day, I was telling my best friend about how off this psychic was and about how she was telling me about Winnie the Pooh tattoo. And it was just like she was crazy and she was just so wrong. And my best friend started crying. And I said, why are you crying? And she pulled down her pants a little bit to show me a tattoo on her hip. And she said, I just got a Winnie the Pooh tattoo in honor of my sister who had passed away. She's like, they were talking about me. You were meant to tell the message to me. And she said, so we have been energetically connected in the past. So I'm not surprised that her grandmother and her sister came to me to get to my best friend. So this was a really great Reiki session that we had. The client was really receptive to everything I was saying. She was very open to the messages, and it was very well received. We had this really great hour together where it was emotional and it was healing, and she felt very relaxed, and she got to connect with her baby, and she got some messages for her best friend. And at the end, we kind of hugged. And I sometimes do think about this client now, and I wonder if she did end up having a girl. I don't hold on to if I'm right or wrong and things like that. I don't mind being wrong. I'm actually happy to be wrong. I don't want to be too psychic and know about things that are going to happen. But I always like to know if those things are kind of true, where 2 energy workers told her she was having a girl. Like, are you having a girl even though you decided not to find out? So another Reiki experience that I'd like to share with you in this episode as well that I think is a really cool experience to share. And I also want to use this platform for not only mediumship, but also for Reiki. I would love to make energy work more just well known. If people have questions about it, have more resources, something that's not too woo-woo-y, and just make it more relatable. So this is a really good story that I have that I like to tell because it just encompasses everything that I love about Reiki and why people are drawn to it. So for this appointment, a middle-aged man came to the spa. Usually one of my first questions is if they've ever had a Reiki appointment before, just so that I can kind of lay out what they can expect, explain what I do, explain what they will feel, or if they have had it before, just explain how I might be different, or just kind of, I like to lay out expectations before an appointment because sometimes people come in nervous, they don't know what to expect, they don't know really what it is, they just found themselves here in a Reiki appointment. And this was kind of the case for this man, and he said, no, I've never had Reiki before, but something feels off, and I just don't feel myself, and I thought I would just give this a try because I don't really know what else to do. And this brought a really big smile to my face because I just love that. I was like, this is wonderful. I was like, perfect, Reiki I think will really help you, even if it's just like the calming of the mind. And he said, so what do I do? And I said, okay, you just lay on the bed and I'm going to work and you'll feel me around you. If you don't feel me always touching you, I'm still working. I just don't always need to have my hands on you. I said, you'll feel relaxed, you'll feel calm, and then I'll tell you things as they go on. And he said, okay. So he laid down, and I always like to start on people's head, usually, unless I'm drawn somewhere else. But I like to start at the head and work my way down to the toes. Sometimes I start in the belly area. It just depends on where you need the most attention. So I started at his head, and I said, have you been having trouble sleeping? And he said, yes. And I said, has something been on your mind? And he said, yes. And I said, okay. When it's someone's first time doing Reiki, I don't want to give them the whole shebang and scare them on the first time because I do understand that it can be a lot to take in on your first experience with Reiki. So I usually try to filter myself. So for a while in this appointment, I was kind of thinking to myself, I need to watch what I say to this guy because I don't want to freak him out. And then that eventually went out the window 10 minutes later. So I continued to talk. And I said, do you have 2 children? And he said, yes. And I said, is the older one a girl and the younger one a boy? And he said, yes. And I said, okay. And is the younger one and you not getting along right now? And he said, yeah, how do you know this? And I said, it's all part of your energy. And I said, are you and your younger son not getting along? And then it's been on your mind, and then you've been thinking about it, which is why you haven't been sleeping very well. And he said, yeah. I said, you're really worried that your son is kind of on this path to be more like your brother, who maybe is kind of asshole-ish and not the greatest person, who didn't make the best choices in life. And he said, yeah, I am really worried about it. And I said, okay, well, this is just going to be a phase, but it's going to be a long phase. And it is going to be a difficult few years. I said, don't expect anything to change overnight, but you're not a bad person or a bad father because you and your son are fighting. Your daughter is definitely a different person. You guys have a different relationship, but the work with your son is going to be your work for the next 4 to 5 years. And I said, this is kind of part of the job of being a dad. And your brother maybe didn't get the support that he needed when he was growing up. So you need to now be that person for your son if you want them to not turn out the same way and have the same experience in life. So as I continue to work, I try to reach people's back while they're laying on their backs. So not very often will I roll someone over to do their back, but I could feel the tension in this man's shoulders, and I couldn't really get to everywhere I wanted to with him laying on his back. So for the second half of the appointment, I asked him to roll over so that I could fully do his back. And I started off by saying, do you have a lot of shoulder pain? And he said, yes. I said, okay. And I was like, wow, your lower back really hurts too. And he said, yeah. And I was like, and right up your spine. And he was like, yeah. And then eventually I was just like, your whole back feels really awful. Like, are you in constant pain? I've never had someone's entire back be this bad. Like, what has happened? What's going on? Eventually I just had to ask him, because as I was moving through his back, I was like, wow, this is a really bad spot. Wow, this is a really bad spot. Ooh, the shoulders are bad. Ooh. And he said that he had broken his back years ago and it's never been the same. And he's always been in this pain. So yes, his entire back does hurt, and that's why. Kind of said, wow, that's insane. I've never seen anyone's back this bad in this much pain. And he kind of explained to me the story, and it was really interesting. So at the end of the appointment, he said, I feel very relaxed and very calm. And I said, that's good. That's kind of the intention. And he kind of looked at me and he just said, thank you. He said, this is exactly what I was needing and exactly what I was looking for when I didn't know what I was looking for. He kind of said, how did you know that I had 2 kids? And how did you know that one was a girl that was older and the boy was younger? He said, I don't get how you would know all those things just by touching me. And I explained it to him this way. I said, you're a father, and you're a father in your genes. So in your energy, you're still that father. So you're carrying around the energy of your daughter and your son, which is why I can pick up on it. It's also why I can pick up on sisters and brothers and cousins that are close to you, because all of these energies compose up each person. So you're not walking around as Joe, the guy with no connections and nothing, no one energetically connected to him. You're walking around as Joe, the guy with 2 kids, a wife you've been married to for 25 years, you have 2 sisters, you have this, you have that, and that is encompassing of who you are. So I said, as an energy worker, I can pick up that energy because it's part of you. Like, you can never get rid of you being a father, which is why I can read those things off of you. This is also why I believe more in kind of Reiki energy versus psychicness, because I don't believe I'm psychic in a lot of ways. I more think that I can just read your energy and what's happening in your life from your physical body and what's connected to you. Sometimes I can kind of get a sense of what might happen, but it's all based on your own energy, your decisions that you make, and things that you choose to do in your life. You're always in control. So there is a saying that says that all mediums are psychic, but not all psychics are mediums. And I don't know how I feel about that, but I do believe that I'm kind of psychic, but in an energetical way, if that makes sense at all. Anyways, my voice has lasted me now for 27 minutes, and I'm going to take that and wrap up this episode. I hope you enjoyed a few Reiki experiences. In the next episode, I'm going to talk about how my mediumship experiences picked right back up as I was trying to enjoy a nice yoga class and the person sitting next to me got an unexpected message. So again, thank you all for listening. If you'd like, please follow me on Instagram and stay connected at Medium in the Middle. And again, subscribe if you want to be notified every time I release a new episode every Tuesday. All right, guys, thanks again for listening. I appreciate it so much. Have a great week.